Good morning and welcome everybody.
Good morning.
We're about 30 seconds late, but we're glad to be on and welcome everybody that's here today.
So we're talking this month about emotions. And so our title today is Seeking Happiness, an Emotional Trap. And we'll say more about that in a minute. But first, I'm going to open with a reading from Ernest Holmes, our founder. And he starts with a quote from Psalms 23:6. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Obviously, that's the 23rd Psalm. And so he says, I know that the Spirit of truth is within me, and that I contact the Spirit through my own self-recognition, belief, and expectancy. I'm not disturbed or confused by past occurrences, for I know that the Spirit of truth ever guides me into perfect activity and complete self-expression. Within me is an ever-present beauty, a never-failing power, a perennial fountain of goodness. Today I expect more, greater, and better thoughts to be expressed through me. All my affairs prosper and quicken into radiant activity because of the indwelling Spirit. I realize that no harm can befall me because I dwell in the secret place of the Most High and abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Perfect life is mine. Complete good is mine. Endless happiness is mine. Abundant supply and health are mine. Joy and peace are mine forevermore. Since I dwell in the shadow of the Almighty, no harm can come to me, no want, no lack, only joy and peace, confidence and trust. There is in the citadel of my soul that which completes my life. This is God, the complete and perfect. In my realization of unity with the central self, I link myself with enduring power. And so it is.
Beautiful.
Whew. Powerful, powerful stuff.
You realize that if we could, I'm going to hold on to this for a little bit.
Embody that.
If we actually were to embody that to the extent that that he's talking about it,
Sort of solves all
it
problems.
would not only solve all problems, but it would actually, we wouldn't have a talk today. Because
Nobody would need it.
exactly, because it's the embodiment of that knowing that is so transformative, but it's also the embodiment of that allows us to engage in life rather than in fear and in doubt and in worry.
Yeah, that's true. And that's why we need to say these prayers, these affirmations, and remind ourselves, because we get no confirmation from our everyday life. You know, all of our input is generally about people or what they're concerned about, what's wrong, even our news. So we have to go to our books, we have to go to our prayers, we have to go to reading spiritual work along these lines to keep ourselves out of that fear and worry. But today we're talking about happiness. And we have a lot to say really about happiness, but I'd like to just start with talking about emotions. A lot of people think emotions are a problem because the ones that are a problem for them are sadness, anger, fear, and all those derivatives of that. And so we can think of our emotions as being a problem, but they are not. They are not a problem. They are for us. They are a guidance system. It's a guidance system for if you're in a feeling that you don't like, you try to discover what's causing it, what belief, what fear, what expectation is causing it, so that you can change that, affirm the truth, which is that it's all good, and then get you out of that emotion. It can also be by a guidance system. I mean, it can steer you. Recently, I heard about a conversation where someone was not happy with what they had chosen as their new career. They were learning a new career, and they had thought that was just exactly what they wanted to do. It's a he, but I'm saying they. And he was given some very good advice by another person, and the person said, well, you learn as much about what you want to do from what you don't want to do as you do from thinking that you want to do something. So one chosen career, let's say, and he was not enjoying what he thought he would enjoy. And so he was advised, and wisely so, well, that's just as helpful
And
to know
so,
what you don't want.
so you're also saying that our emotions are also an early warning system.
Yes.
They're a warning system that something may be going on that we do need to tend to. I think what the distinction I'd want to make with that is that some, if we're not careful, can be run by our emotions, by our emotional life, rather than integrating it into our mindful life as well. And the beauty of having both mind and emotion, but having both heart and soul, having both heart and mind, is that when integrated, they work elegantly together. When separated, there's a sense of disconnect and loss. And it's really difficult for people who are run strictly by emotion. That's how I'm feeling. That's what I'm going to do. They can't count on themselves to be able to be reliable in a whole lot of areas, because if they don't feel like it, then they can't do it. As opposed to, I don't feel like it. I wonder what's going on that I need to change or look at or address, so that I can then move forward. And maybe when I look at that, I'll find out that's not something that I want to move forward with, or not something that I can do.
Exactly. It's just like, if you remember when you were a child and people say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you kids often have something that sounds fun and exciting. Little boys want to be a fireman or a policeman or
I
pilot
to be Wyatt Earp.
or a cowboy. Yeah. And little girls are often nurses or teachers or whatever. And then as you keep growing older, you just kind of notice what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what you don't enjoy doing. And you realize that this profession might have you doing things that you really are not good at or don't like. And so it guides you into another arena. Well, I think I'd like to do this. I'm good at this, or this brings me joy. I enjoy this because this brings me joy. So that's your guidance system into joy and happiness through choice of what you want to do career-wise.
Right.
And a lot of times it feels like it's not even a choice. I must do this,
So I want to talk a little bit about happy versus unhappy and the pursuit of happiness. The first distinction I'd like to make is that if we are wanting to do something that'll make us happy to get out of being unhappy, then it's probably not going to work very well, because unhappiness is something that needs to be resolved rather than something to be run away from. And I think when we run to happiness, I want to do something to make me happy, that denial then changes and affects the quality of the happy. It doesn't mean we can't do things that are in favor of us that we know in the past have brought us happiness, but we also have to know that underneath it, there's something to pay attention to. Now, the benefit of moving in the direction of something that would bring you joy, even when you're feeling a lot of pain, is a good example for me was when I had to go into the Army, and I got to New York City, and I knew that I was going to go to basic training, and I knew my first day of basic training was going to be, from my point of view, a nightmare, because I was going to have to give up everything I liked about freedom to be inducted into the Army.
How old were you?
I was 21, and I'm going to be now a soldier, and I don't want to be a soldier. And so how I felt about that was very unhappy. I went to Radio City Music Hall, and I thought, even if it's my last day of life, the way I know it, I can still do something that I like. I went to Radio City Music Hall, I watched the Rockettes, I listened to the organ, and I watched Sand Pebbles with Steve McQueen, the movie. I'll never forget that. Why that's important is 50, 60 years later, I have both the memory of how bad I felt and how good I felt. How bad I felt about having to go into the Army, and how good I felt when the Rockettes came out and I saw this beautiful hall and I listened to the wonderful music. And I will never forget the experience of being in New York on that day. So we can combine experiences, but that didn't mean that I was caught off the hook, because every now and then, even during the movie, this cold feeling would go through me like, oh my God, your life is going to be over. And then I would go back. So, but I think the pursuit of happiness is a trap in many cases, because it's what we do to avoid feeling bad rather than addressing the feeling bad. Now, that's also just as true when it comes to our spirituality, that spirituality is not a method of avoidance. And it's not what we do in order to not feel bad. You're disappearing. Spirituality is not something that we do in order not to feel bad. It's something that we do to encourage our nature, the nature that Ernest Holmes talks about, which is that the universe is in favor of us. it's a way of looking at ourselves to allow ourselves to embrace a greater truth, not a way to avoid feeling bad. I'm going to go meditate because I feel bad.
So by spirituality, you mean spiritual practice?
Yeah, spiritual practice, but also our spiritual knowledge is increased through spiritual practice, and that spiritual knowledge allows us to embrace a larger world. Sometimes the way we can undo the negative is to see a bigger picture, to see where that negative is in relationship to the whole picture. Often, or too often, at least for myself, I found that my focus on the negative makes the negative my entire world, an event or something that's bothering me. When in fact, if I looked at it in the context of how's it going to be a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, I'd say, actually, it's going to be a nothing. So why is it occupying as much space? But again, I have to look at it at some level and face it at some level. So spiritual practice and spirituality is not a strategy to avoid negative emotion. Spiritual practice and meditation and spirituality is an opportunity to expand the world you live in so that the negative has a position, has a place, for it doesn't occupy all of your space.
So let's define spiritual practice.
Okay.
So spiritual practice is practicing knowing that you're a spiritual being. And you do that through prayer, meditation, reading spiritual books, taking spiritual classes. You know, a number of things are offered online today. And so it's giving attention to the fact that you are an eternal spiritual being. And that can alleviate a lot of our fears that we have, because we do know in the physical that all of us die, life ends as we know it. And yet spiritually, we know that life never dies. It transitions. It changes to this eternal.
So you said that we're all going to die. So that means that the extended warranty that I just purchased for myself for the 60 months or 60,000 years.
Yeah. You sure that wasn't for the car?
Oh, I thought it was for me. They keep calling me like it's for me. You know?
But the spiritual practice is very important to alleviate normal human condition fears. But I wanted to talk more about the trap of seeking happiness, because a lot of seeking of happiness ends up turning up empty feelings, and it can often end up in addiction. You know, a lot of teenagers like to smoke marijuana because it feels good. They relax and they think it's fun, and yet it feels fun to them. But we've really learned that the adolescent brain is not prepared for that, and it alters how it will develop so that it doesn't develop as well. So what starts out doing something that feels good is for joy, for pleasure, is in the long term bad for you and a mistake. And so is alcohol sometimes, you know. Well, I feel better when I have a drink. Yeah, fine. But as long as that doesn't progress to an addiction.
Or as long as it doesn't stop you from solving the problem that had you have want to drink.
Right.
What I see is that often what we're wanting to do is to quiet the noise that we need to take care of. And so because we don't quiet the noise, we deaden ourselves to it. We continue to have whatever problem or whatever we need to take care of uncared for.
And what we learned is that the number of addictions there are so many behavioral addictions too.
Yeah.
It's no longer limited to drugs or alcohol. There's behavior with food. There's behavior with pornography, sexual addiction. There's so many things that become addictive because the body creates its own endorphins or lack thereof that regulate our addictions. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but we all know that sometimes seeking happiness, like I'm going to go out and party tonight, you know, it can be an empty feeling when the party's over, not something that brings you continuous joy. And much like the reading and the prayer that we read originally, those ideas bring me comfort, bring me peace, bring me joy, and I need to be reminded of them. And that's not an addictive process.
Spiritual practice can also start in ways more subtle than that. Spiritual practice can also be looking for the good in others. Spiritual practice can be looking into the eyes of a person and saying, I want to see their heart, and I want to see, and I want to know their soul. I want going out in nature and not just naming the things that you see or doing it with the idea that you're going to feel better, but going out in nature to embrace it, to connect with it, to see how it operates. Those are spiritual practices that smoothly or gently and in a very loving kind of way allow us to embrace this world. Whatever we can do to see the world's larger picture, to see our relationship to all that is, when we see ourselves as a finger on the hand of God, rather than a finger that's been severed somehow and doesn't have a place and doesn't belong. Those are things those ideas are transformative. When I go out in nature and I look at a squirrel and I realize that we're related, and yesterday,
Or an octopus.
yeah, or an octopus. And yesterday we went to the ocean and we had our sandwich and our breakfast sandwich by the water, and a sparrow jumped up on Judah's hat and looked at me, and I took a little piece of the bread and I held it. He jumped right in my hand and took the bread and looked at me with both ways, and I thought, what an incredible experience! What an experience of joy to have this little creature trust me. And now, of course, he knew I wasn't hungry, and for him, and but the relationship.
But he did it not one time.
He did it multiple times, yeah. And then when he didn't like the bread, he picked up my finger. He said, "I want something.
I'm ready for meat now."
Yeah, right. So, but these opportunities are there for us to embrace, or what I've heard other people say, "Oh, the damn birds! I can't believe they're always here." Yeah, well, you can say that, and you're missing something. Of course, it had been large seagulls, I might have said something different, but
Well, and many of our people are watching have animals that they love.
oh yeah,
And they bring them great joy. And that's anytime we love or serve others, we are bringing ourselves happiness and joy.
I have to share this because it's not safe, it's not private. At work, I'm working in a mental health facility, and I'm working with some pretty people in crisis. And so they asked me to do groups. So I'm doing a group with about 10 people that are in serious crisis, which is why they're in a hospital. And they all have a story, and each of them has a story of the misery and the pain that they're suffering, and it's real. And so I asked them if they would please close their eyes and imagine if they were holding a puppy, and imagine what it felt like to have the heartbeat of that puppy be a heartbeat that you can feel. And then imagine the puppy climbing up your chest and getting its legs around your shoulder, and then reaching over to kiss you. And he's licking you. And so we were all done. I said, "How did that feel?" And she said, one of the patients said, "You had me when you said I was holding a puppy." And another one began crying. She said, "Being licked by it just changes everything." And I said, "So what would it be like for you if every time that you're really distressed and you can't stand anything any longer, you have your puppy? You close your eyes and you allow your puppy to be." See, you have to change your mind and have something there. And where I'm going with this is, when you have something that you feel good about that you can put in place, the feeling bad has to have some perspective. It changes how it is in relationship with you. We need a less intimate relationship with our pain and a more intimate relationship with our joy. And we have to cultivate that. We have to give ourselves permission to do that. None of the people that were there, it didn't occur to them that they could close their eyes and create anything other than suffering.
Right. So a puppy dog that's licking you, or a cat that's purring.
Yeah, or a cat that licks you with his kind of sandpaper tongue, who you know loves you, and or purrs. There's nothing quite like that purring to have you feel somehow. And even if it's not about you, it just feels, oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, so you can do it, but you can use your imagination to move yourself into the place where you can allow joy to be a possibility.
Exactly. So there are a couple of other things that are recommended. I mentioned one about service, and Albert Schweitzer said this about that, who spent his whole life, he was from a wealthy family in Switzerland or Germany, and he ends up spending his whole life serving poor African people as a physician in Africa. And he says, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." And I think that's very, very true.
Yeah.
And then we have some that have also similar directions. The Dalai Lama says this: "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And if you want to be happy, practice compassion. So, and the Buddhists are great at teaching people how to practice compassion. Practice, calm means with, being with another person's passion, with their feelings.
Yes, a Buddhist monk was having his birthday, and the head of the monastery told him that his gift was nothing. And he said, "Thank you for the nothingness." The gift of nothing, as opposed to the gift of something.
Okay. Another one from Albert Schweitzer. Happiness is nothing more than good health and a bad memory. In other words, choosing not to remember the bad times, not focusing on the bad times. One other clue for bringing oneself joy is gratitude. And that's also a practice. Compassion is a practice, something that you can practice doing when you're feeling down. Also, gratitude. And so this person is the White House Health Policy Director, or was. Kavita Patel says it's not happiness that brings us gratitude. It's gratitude that brings us happiness.
That's a really critical thing, and I'd like to spend a minute on it. The distinction between the pursuit of happiness is often the mistake we make. The pursuit of service that brings us happiness is far longer lasting, is far richer, and has depth. So I think for us, it's kind of like watching a movie and waiting for the happy part, or the part that'll make us happy. I hear this is a really good movie, it's going to make me happy. And the truth is, what makes it a good movie is when you engage in the movie, when you connect with it. By the time you become totally involved in it, it becomes part of you. Something happens to you that's transformative. The same thing with music. You put on a piece of music, you can say, "I'm putting on this piece of music to be happy." The music awakens in you something that allows happiness to unfold. You can't make yourself happy, but you can put yourself in a position where happiness is a possibility. And so I think, and I see this a lot with people that work very hard to get more things to make themselves happy. But instead of getting deeper into life where happiness lives. And so the superficial pursuit of getting things to make me happy is probably good for Amazon, but not necessarily good for you.
Yeah. And, the single thing, we talked about spiritual practice, but what I'd like to do is take it back a step further than that. If we don't believe that there is a power greater than us, then I think that's a setup for a little unhappiness and feeling powerless. So I love, and I use the statement that Ernest Holmes said so often: there is a power for good in the universe that is greater than you are, I am, and you can use it. So of course, when I say it to myself, there's a power for good in the universe that is greater than I am, and I can use it, because I remind myself that we are not powerless. As Bob said, we are like fingers on the hand of God. We are connected. We are part of it. So we don't just have to ask for God, please bring me this. We have to know it's already there, and we can access it by acknowledging it and accepting it.
One of the most transformative experiences for me in my life was getting to meet Dr. Raymond Moody. He was actually invited to present with us on a stage when we were teaching hypnosis. And I got to know him, and we got to see his videos. And Life After Life is the book that he wrote, and the video that he made. That was transformative for me, because for the very first time, I saw people who had died, and I actually met them. Daniel Brinkley was one of them. I met people that had died, had gone to the other side.
Had gone to the morgue.
Right, yeah, taken to the morgue, right, and woke up in the morgue. And I mean, this is incredible. But when you actually you just don't hope, or you just don't sort of, I have this idea there's a heaven, and it's got a lot, everybody wears a lot of white, because I guess they've been out of color. And the food is all vegetarian.
No doubt.
Just send me to hell. No, I want the music, and I want
the colorful
yeah,
life.
yeah, right. But when you get to this black and white kind of thinking, and you realize people that actually have been to the other side, thousands of people have been to the other side, and all report having found more love than they ever could have imagined experiencing. And most all of them not even wanting to come back because it felt so wonderful. that just changed my whole idea about dying. It didn't make me want to go, but what I see is a continuity. What I see is a relationship with the beyond, or with the afterlife, that there's more life. And that is just so transformative. So it makes me think that everything I'm doing here and now is a part of an ongoing story that I'll be a part of, and that has value, as opposed to, well, I'm here, let me get whatever I can, and when it's over, I'll be dead, and I guess that's it. That's awful for me, at least, as a way of living. Yeah, it's not very satisfying. So this notion, and if you don't have a notion of what goes on, spend some time researching that. And I highly recommend the Raymond Moody videos. You can get it on YouTube, Life After Life. And because when you actually feel you've gotten the technical or the physical data that you need to say, what, it's true. I know that physicists have discovered that matter can't be destroyed, or life cannot be destroyed. It can be transformed, it can be transmuted, but energy can't be destroyed. Okay, so what are human beings? We're a source of energy. So the physicists have discovered it in one way. What I liked about Raymond Moody's discovery, and others that have done that same kind of research, I can't think of the psychiatrist that did it also, that I think he was in Miami, who had a subject that he worked with at
Weiss.
Dr. Weiss. I mean, there's been a lot of people. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of cases where people have come back to talk about the life they've lived before. Mm-hmm. Thousands of cases where they've gone to the other side and said they came. I mean, it's just, there's too much data. The reason we don't hear about it is because many contemporary religions don't really want to deal with it. And
although in hospitals now, I wouldn't say every hospital, but in many hospitals,
yeah,
where they now standardly ask people who they know died and came back if they had any unusual experiences they'd like to report, because they're trying to get statistical information on it.
So, but that, and we're not, this is not our talk today, but what's important about that is that when you have that spiritual framework, when you have that spiritual foundation, it makes it much more difficult for any kind of storm to blow down your house. When you have that kind of a foundation, it just changes everything. We have one of our practitioners often says you
can't lose with the stuff we use.
Yeah, right. I love
That's
it.
Sandy Marchman.
Yeah, but what she's saying is that she has a foundation. With that foundation, it's really hard to rock the boat. It's really hard to knock down the house. And so if your house is shaky, and it can be, you need to go back and see what the foundation needs to have in it that it doesn't have. How can you reinforce that foundation? How could you build a better foundation? All of us, especially as we get older, are going to lose more of the people that we care about. We're going to lose them in this world. We're going to lose them in this experience. But if we don't have some way of making sense of it, what I see of the people who can't make sense of it is a lot more sadness and depression that lasts a lot longer than just about the loss of the person that they lost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we know, and I'm actually trying to eliminate from my vocabulary the word die. Another way we say it is make their transition. But I just am knowing that they are just walking through a door, to what we call the other side.
Well, I love the things that Ram Dass says. Ram Dass has said that one, we're all just walking each other home, and home doesn't mean to a funeral or a cemetery. And the other is that death is just like taking off
a tight shoe.
And it's comfortable, it's easy, and it's just like taking off a tight shoe. Okay, I know we need to end here, and we're going to
end with a prayer.
We're going to end with a prayer, and for those of you that can hang on a little bit longer, we've got a great piece of music we're going to share. By the way, for those of you who can't hang on, I did post that piece of music on my Facebook page.
Oh,
yeah. So it's okay, that's the piece we're going to play. Yeah.
Okay, so let's close with a prayer, and let's know that we have everything we need to know to create our own happiness. We know that life doesn't give us everything we want, but it does give us everything we need. And so as we trust that all things unfold for our highest good, we trust and that our painful lessons and our happy lessons are perfect for us.
And I know that we know this in our heart and soul, and that knowing this in the heart and soul of our own being, all we really need to do is simply give ourselves permission to wake up to this greater truth and to say yes to it.
And together we say,
and so
and
it is.
so it is.
I don't want to forget, for those of you that would like to support us, there is a way you can do that. And maybe you can show them, and then we're going to end the recording. Yeah. If you'd like to support our ministry, and we'd love it if you would, all you need to do is to go to Center for Spiritual Living of the Palm Beaches. And there's also, it says ways to donate at the top. We're showing you the screen right now. Ways to donate, and you can do that. Donate any amount that you want, and any amount that you give is appreciated, makes a difference to us.
So let's do this affirmation together.
Absolutely.
Today. The first line is hard to see. My investment today is made with the full realization that God is the source of my supply and returns it to me enriched and multiplied.
And so it is. And we're going to go out of that.
Where's my screen share? Ah, here we go.
Okay. And now we're going to end the recording.
We're going to share the music.
We're going to end the recording.
Oh, yes, we do.